At 3 in the morning, your mind can turn a single unanswered message into a disaster that doesn't even exist. A friend doesn't reply. Someone looks at you differently. A plan changes. And suddenly your brain starts writing stories. Maybe they're angry. Maybe I ruined everything. Maybe something terrible is about to happen. By sunrise, you've lived through 100 imaginary disasters, and none of them were real. But here's what nobody ever tells you. The problem was never that you thought too much. The problem was that you trusted every thought you had. Nobody tells you this, but overthinking is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's actually a sign that your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is that it was designed for a world that no longer exists. Thousands of years ago, the human brain had one primary job: survive. To survive, it had to anticipate every possible threat. The rustle in the bushes, the unfamiliar face, the storm on the horizon. The brain that worried more often lived longer. The brain that relaxed too easily didn't make it. So your mind learned something it has never forgotten. When in doubt, keep thinking, keep scanning, keep preparing for the worst. That brain saved your ancestors. But today, that same survival system is lying awake at 3 in the morning, replaying a conversation from 2 weeks ago that the other person barely remembers. Here is what I want you to understand. You are not broken. You have a mind that was built to protect you, even when there is nothing left to protect you from. Think about the last thing you couldn't stop thinking about. A message that wasn't answered. A decision you couldn't make. A mistake you kept replaying. Your brain wasn't torturing you for fun. It identified something it perceived as a threat, rejection, failure, uncertainty, and it refused to let go until the threat was resolved. The tragedy is that most modern threats cannot be solved by thinking alone. You cannot think your way into someone loving you back. You cannot think your way into certainty about a future that hasn't happened yet. But your brain doesn't know that, so it keeps going, and going, and going. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers who ever lived, wrote something that stopped me completely when I first read it. He wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And what took me years to actually believe is that the stories we tell ourselves about events are often more painful than the events themselves. A delayed text becomes rejection. A mistake becomes proof of failure. A silence becomes abandonment. We don't suffer from reality nearly as much as we suffer from the meaning our minds quietly attach to reality, without ever asking whether that meaning is true. In 1971, a psychologist named Aaron Beck was sitting with a patient who had just received a promotion she had worked toward for years. It was everything she wanted, but instead of feeling happy, she looked terrified. Beck asked her what she was thinking. She said, "Now everyone will expect more from me, and when I fail, they'll finally see that I was never good enough to begin with." The promotion hadn't changed her life. Her thought about the promotion had. Beck realized something that would go on to change the entire field of mental health. People weren't suffering from their circumstances. They were suffering from automatic thoughts, fast, invisible interpretations that happened in the split second between an event and an emotion. And here was the revolutionary part. Those thoughts could be questioned, not suppressed, not ignored, simply questioned. Is this thought actually true? Is this the only possible explanation? What would I tell someone I love if they had this exact thought? That one shift from believing every thought to questioning it gave millions of people their lives back. Because here is the real trap of overthinking that nobody talks about. It feels like control. It feels like if you just think long enough, hard enough, carefully enough, you will eventually reach certainty. But certainty is not waiting at the end of more thinking. It never was. The people who seem most at peace are not the people who figured everything out. They are the people who made peace with not knowing. They moved forward while their minds were still full of questions. They took action before they felt completely ready. And they discovered something that cannot be learned by thinking about it. You only find out what you are capable of by actually doing the thing you are afraid of. I spent years waiting to feel ready, waiting until the doubt disappeared, waiting until I was certain enough. That moment never came, and eventually I understood why. Readiness is not a feeling that arrives before action. It is a feeling that arrives because of action. You do not feel ready and then begin. You begin, imperfectly, messily, uncertainly, and then slowly you start to feel ready. The overthinker's mind is not a weakness. It is the raw material of something extraordinary. The same mind that keeps you awake at 3 in the morning, replaying conversations that are already over. That exact same mind, pointed towards something meaningful, becomes focus, creativity, and the kind of resilience that most people spend their whole lives wishing they had. The problem was never your mind. The problem was believing that every thought it produced deserved your complete trust. So the next time your mind starts spiraling, don't fight it. Don't tell yourself to stop thinking. Just ask one question. Is this thought helping me move forward, or is it keeping me standing still? That question will not silence your mind overnight. But asked honestly, again and again, it begins to do something quietly extraordinary. It teaches you that thoughts are suggestions, not commands. That fear is a signal, not a sentence. That peace does not come from controlling every thought in your head. It comes from realizing you were never required to believe all of them. Because the mind that has been creating your suffering all this time, that exact same mind, is also the one that can create your freedom. The goal was never to silence your mind. The goal was to become wise enough to know which thoughts deserve your attention and which ones deserve to be left behind.